Hello and welcome to another episode of Pakistanomy. My name is Uzair, and as we discussed when we started this year's conversations early January, a lot of the conversations that I'm going to try to have this year are going to be focused on foreign policy and foreign relations and international affairs, primarily because, as we mentioned at the beginning of the year, my view is that this year is going to be dominated by foreign policy and international affairs given everything that is going on in the region, in the world, and also here in Washington, D.C., with a new presidency starting under Donald Trump, who's come back into the White House and just took office with his inauguration happening just a couple of days ago. So today we're going to be talking to Ali Nazari, who's head of foreign relations for the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, the NRF. Ali, somebody who understands Afghan political dynamics really well, has worked with many of the political leaders in Afghanistan over the years. And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with Ali is to understand the state of play in Afghanistan, the status of the resistance, but also to explore from his perspective in terms of what has not worked in the Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship for a number of years now, and what he thinks could be the path forward given growing tensions between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban in recent weeks as well. So, Ali, first of all, welcome to Pakistanomy, and thank you so much for taking out the time today.
Thank you very much for having me, Uzair. I look forward to our discussion today.
I want to begin with sort of, giving our audience, because typically we talk about economic issues on this podcast and things that are sort of, about currency movements and trade and things like that. Many of the audience, given that perspective, may not be fully familiar with the current state of the resistance in Afghanistan and what the National Resistance Front is all about. So maybe at the initial level, like help us understand what's going on in Afghanistan today and what is the status of the resistance in Afghanistan, given that I was reading in recent weeks there has been reports of fighting, etc., between the Afghan Taliban and other fighters and groups in the country.
Of course, to give you a bit of background information about the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, or the NRF, we started our resistance, our struggle, from August 15th, 2021 onwards. So when the government collapsed on August 15th, 2021, thousands of Afghanistan's armed forces came to the north, came to Panjshir Valley and Andarab Valley. And from there, the son of the late Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, Mr. Ahmad Massoud, who on August 15th went from Kabul to Panjshir, declared the National Resistance Front with the remnants of Afghanistan's armed forces, with many other politicians, with the people of that area and many other provinces that came into Panjshir. And since then, the National Resistance Front has been pursuing a military resistance, has been pursuing a political resistance, has been encouraging civil resistance against not only the Taliban, but against the 21 terrorist groups, including the TTP, that are all aligned, that all of them share the same ideology. And for us, when it comes to our objectives and our aims, what we've been saying from day one up to today is that our struggle is, of course, for a free and liberated Afghanistan and Afghanistan that is for all its people, a government that establishes justice, that grants equal rights to all citizens. Of course, this is our aims when it comes to our domestic matters. Yet, we believe our struggle is the continuation of the war on terror, because for the past 3.5 years, the National Resistance Front, from day one up to today, has been not only battling and fighting against the Taliban terrorist group of Afghanistan, but against each terror network and each terrorist group that resides in Afghanistan and is receiving protection and is receiving assistance from the Taliban. So this includes Al Qaeda, this includes Jamaat Ansarullah, this includes the TTP, This includes the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, ISIS, all of them. Of course, not many people follow the news in Afghanistan, but for the past 3.5 years, we've been active. We've been expanding. On August and September of 2021, we were only in 2 provinces of Afghanistan in the northeast. Today, we've expanded to 20 provinces. In the year 2024, we had more than 360 operations in 20 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces, meaning in 2024, we were able to expand to the majority of the country since we are now present in 20 provinces. And this is becoming a great challenge for the Taliban and other terrorist groups because the people support us. The NRF has shown extraordinary capabilities, competence, legitimacy within Afghanistan, and this has become a major cause for concern for the terrorists inside Afghanistan.
I want to sort of talk a bit about the internal dynamics in Afghanistan because, as you rightfully said, people don't pay attention to what's going on internally, right? But whenever there is an international conversation, either it's focused on the terror groups that are operating, which the UN has also talked about, that they have growing space and protection of the Afghan Taliban, but also issues related to inclusion, in particular, women rights, girls' education, etc. Can you help us understand from your understanding what life is like for ordinary Afghans right now who are living under the rule of the Afghan interim government, under the Afghan Taliban, so to speak? Because again, it's something that people don't fully pay attention to. So I would love to have this opportunity to hear from you of what it's like right now.
Of course, life for all citizens right now is absolutely bleak. But the situation when it comes to girls and women is much worse. Basically, the Taliban have stripped girls and women from their most basic rights as human beings, as Muslims, as citizens of Afghanistan. Nowhere on the planet do we have such treatment against women as we see it today inside Afghanistan. The OIC just a few weeks ago held a conference in Pakistan, and they condemned this situation. We have individual countries condemning this. The Human Rights Watch, just today, the ICC issued arrest warrants against the Taliban terrorist organizations leadership because we have never seen such treatment of women, of girls anywhere around the
Which
globe
I
in
may,
the
if I
modern
may
era.
interrupt, right? This is the same ICC that is seeking arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu. And when that story came out, a lot of people, including in Pakistan, but Muslim majority countries, sort of talked a lot about it. But for some reason, when these arrest warrants are sought for crimes against humanity against the Afghan Taliban leaders, we don't see as much media coverage even of those arrest warrants in places like Pakistan or other Islamic Muslim countries, which is unfortunate to say the least.
Yes, because I see, well, there's many reasons for this. One is not enough information is being transmitted through the mass media, whether it's individual countries or the international media outlets. And so there isn't much information going to the people for them to understand how bleak the situation inside Afghanistan is. But just remember, putting aside education for a minute, women cannot speak with women outside of their household today because there's a fatwa issued by the Taliban's leadership saying that women cannot speak with women of outside of their household and outside of their families. Women are unable to attend public baths. And this is something I've been raising many times as a group that considers itself an Islamic movement, an Islamic party, or so forth. It bans women from attending public baths, which in many villages and many places in Afghanistan, especially during the winter months, they lack public plumbing, but modern plumbing inside of their homes. And they are forced to go to public baths every week or a few times a week in order to fulfill their religious obligations. And the Taliban have taken away this right from women. So a woman cannot practice their religion, cannot practice the holy religion of Islam because the Taliban have restricted them, not allowing them to go out of their homes. And so this is just a small example. It's much worse than this. If we just study the different fatwas and the different proclamations that have come out, especially in the last year, it just shows that to the Taliban terrorists and their other terrorist allies, women have no value. Women are not treated as human beings. And this is basically problematic. It should not be tolerated by anyone. And basically, it is a group that is taking a stance not only against humanity, but against our own religion, because whatever they're doing isn't reflecting on our belief system, isn't reflecting on the tenets of the holy religion of Islam, and is basically contrary to whatever is stated in the Holy Quran and other sacred texts.
I want to zoom out now into the international affairs domain and maybe start our conversation focusing particularly with Pakistan and Afghanistan because, as you are aware and as the audience is aware, the tension level has gone up between the Taliban in Afghanistan and the Pakistani authorities in Pakistan, Islamabad and Rawalpindi, to the extent that Pakistan carried out airstrikes recently on TTP hideouts. And the relationship has continued to sour over a number of months now. I want to begin by asking you, because you know the history of this relationship between the Taliban and the Pakistani government and the safe haven conversations, etc., that have happened over the year. Do you think Pakistan's bet on the Afghan Taliban backfired?
Well, I've been stating this a few times. Of course, to give you a bit of background, before August 2021, we did make an overreach to the Pakistani government many times. And our message in meetings inside Kabul and outside of Afghanistan was that the return of the Taliban is neither in the interest of Afghanistan nor is it in the interest of Pakistan. It is going to backfire. We believe that the investment that was made for 40 years on such a radical extremist group based on terrorism, based on ethnocentrism, based on many other factors, at the end of the day, is basically going to destabilize not only Afghanistan, but the wider region. And our message was we have to go and address the root causes of this trust deficit that exists between Afghanistan and Pakistan, identify the problems and address them instead of creating other problems that might exacerbate the current situation. For this reason, I even wrote an article that became a chapter in a book published in Karachi in 2021, where I investigated and I conducted a comprehensive research about the bilateral relations of Afghanistan and Pakistan in the past 76 years now, and how all of this, what we're experiencing today, what we experienced a few years ago, goes back to the irrational decisions that were made decades ago, starting with the when decisions were made right after the independence of Pakistan, which unfortunately the first irrational decision was made by the Afghanistan side, and this is something that I acknowledge. However, it's a complicated history, a complex history, where both sides have made wrong decisions, and one of the wrong decisions is investing in such a group, investing in such an extremist groups, starting from the 1970s onwards. And we've lost many opportunities to achieve peace between the two countries. And at the same time, Afghanistan has made the same mistakes on its part. But when it comes to the circumstances of today and what we're experiencing in both countries, I believe that with different decisions in 2021, we could have prevented this. And now other stakeholders are exploiting the situation. And Afghanistan is becoming an arena for geopolitical competition for other countries. And if both countries, the people, do not come together and reach a consensus over the future and resolve any issues that they have, then we will be facing a much more bleak situation, unfortunately, in the near future.
And given that context, right, and I agree that there is a long history of bad choices being made over the years, and as you said, dates back 7+ decades on both sides. But we are where we are. And now we see some signals, at least on the Pakistani side, that there's some conversation or some signaling that Pakistan is trying to recalibrate or reorient its Afghanistan strategy. The DGISI, the spy chief of the country, was in Tajikistan recently. The Haqqanis were in the UAE recently having meetings, etc. From your perspective, again, as somebody who's very deeply familiar with the dynamics of this bilateral relationship over the years, how do you see, or what do you see as the possible avenues of Pakistan perhaps reorienting its Afghan strategy in a way that sort of charts a better course forward, given the realities on the ground, to which I would echo your point that if there is radicalization in Afghanistan, Pakistan itself will be destabilized because those same elements will pursue a radical agenda across the border. So how do you see, or what are your thoughts on ways in which we can get past this long history and reorient the strategy between the two countries?
Well, there's many areas that can be addressed. I believe that the recent events and recent trips made are good signs. We welcome such signals from any neighboring country that they would like to shift the policy. Yeah, what we believe is that first and foremost, every country in the region, especially our neighbors, and our most important neighbor, which is Pakistan, has to understand that the only way of defeating this threat is to allow the people of Afghanistan to manage it, the people of Afghanistan to be supported by all neighboring countries to take over their country once again. Because right now, the people of Afghanistan are under occupation. They are taken hostage by 21 terrorist groups. These terrorist groups are fully in control of Afghanistan and is using Afghanistan as a launching pad against other countries, whether it's Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and others. The same threat level that exists from Afghanistan against Pakistan, it exists against Tajikistan, it exists against other Central Asian countries, and many countries outside of the region. And so we need to reach this understanding that it's the only way of defeating these groups is to allow Afghanistan's people to mobilize, to organize, and to take over their country once again. That's one. Two is what is very much important is more engagement on the regional level. The only way that we can fully solve this problem that has existed for decades now is through a regional consensus. Especially the neighboring countries, countries that share a border with Afghanistan, have to come together, discuss whatever security concerns that they have, economic concerns that they have, political concerns that they have, and reach a consensus that takes the people of Afghanistan's interests into consideration, as well as the interests of everyone in the region. Something that hasn't been done for the past 50 years. We had many power vacuums inside Afghanistan. However, if such a regional consensus came into being before or after the power vacuum, we could have stabilized the situation in Afghanistan and prevented the destabilization of the wider region. Yet one thing that we see constant rivalry and competition even between the neighboring countries of Afghanistan. And this has been problematic for the past few decades. I believe as a first step, the engagement level that is increasing now between the regional countries, this is a very good sign. And we are optimistic that such a path can give us the opportunity to discuss all of these matters in order to reach a consensus. However, reaching that consensus itself is difficult. It has its challenges, yet we have to overcome these challenges and with such a consensus, start a new era of amity in our region in order for all countries to benefit economically, to prevent any security challenges, and to create the integration that is needed. We haven't had any open confrontation, open wars in the region, any conventional war. Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands haven't been killed in such a conflict. So we don't have that history that other regions have had. Yet if they're able to reach it, if we're seeing such integration in Europe and in other parts of the world, why can't we have such integration in our region and revive the civilizational sphere that existed in this region for hundreds of years, revive that glorious era that we had in our history and the legacy that belongs to all of us, and to create the conditions to basically facilitate progress, facilitate economic development, and to be able to compete with other regions in the world. We cannot compete with other people if we're busy competing with one another and challenging one another and continuing to create security, economic, political obstacles for one another. So that era has passed. We have to sit around the same table, discuss the future, discuss our current problems, and of course the troubling past, and arrive at a conclusion that benefits everyone.
Building on that, right? This is one thing that I've been sort of thinking about, and I would love your thoughts on this. As I see it as from the outside, observing how Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Iran, etc., deal with the Taliban, right? I think what the Taliban have been able to successfully do is build these bilateral relationships with these countries so that there's no unified approach that the region has on certain non-negotiables with the Taliban, inclusive government, rights of women, education, de-radicalization, and core to this issue is the safe haven provided to terror groups like TTP, IMU, ETIM, etc. As you said, 20 plus groups operating. What's your view of the fact that, so long as the region, this is my view, and I would love your thoughts on this, is unable to have a unified strategy on dealing with the Afghan Taliban on these issues, that none of them are ever going to be able to deal with these issues in the bilateral format because the Taliban will just carve them into pieces and play them one against the other. What's your view? Because this is my initial analysis. You're the expert, so I figured I get your input on this as well.
Well, such a policy has failed for the past 3.5 years. As you rightly stated, the Taliban have been exploiting this policy that all countries have pursued. So no one is an exception except for Tajikistan, which has had the most strict position vis-a-vis the Taliban. But we haven't seen any positive outcome, any positive impact with pursuing engagement without pressure by individual countries. Too much incentives were granted to the Taliban. Too much concessions were granted in the past 3.5 years, even before that, during the negotiations in Doha and the different conferences that were held and how they were platformed in many countries. But what we've seen is they've become more emboldened. It has increased their confidence. They are exploiting different countries for their own interests. And I believe that with the failure of this policy, especially our neighboring countries have to wake up and explore better options. And a terrorist group, a criminal organization like the Taliban and others who are around them, whether it's the TTP, whether it's Ansarullah or IMU or Al Qaeda, which all of them are the same. It's just different labels. Their ideology is the same. And right now, just to give you an example, in Pakistan, many of these attacks that are conducted under the label of TTP, it's actually Al Qaeda members and the Taliban of Afghanistan that accompany TTP members inside Pakistan to conduct these attacks. So all of them are on the same side.
If I may interrupt, the way I describe it, I'm a Premier League soccer fan, football fan. So the way I describe it is there are like 20 teams operating in the league, and the players keep changing and transferring to one team, but it's the league that you should be paying attention to and its components, as opposed to the individual teams, because the players make up that league and they keep rotating around.
Of course, and that is the case because we face the same situation, and this is something that was confirmed, verified by the United Nations Security Council reports that the Taliban are sending TTP members and Al-Qaeda members and Ansarullah members to the north to face us. So this is something that we face on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, where many of the terrorists that we face are not the Taliban of Afghanistan. They are basically, many of them are TTP members, many of them are Al-Qaeda members, and we have presented evidence of this and videos of these foreign terrorist fighters coming to our regions fighting on behalf of the Taliban. So we need the region needs to come together, rethink the policy, and of course, not only the region, the international community, because they failed with this policy as well. The international community has to be included as well, and to reach a new agreement, a consensus that a different approach is needed now. And one thing that hasn't been tried is pressuring the Taliban inside and outside. Inside, the international community, the region has forces like us, and outside through sanctions and other matters. Well, one way of bringing pressure on the Taliban, which we've been working on in the United States, is to cut off the aid and assistance that the Biden administration has been sending to Kabul for the past 3 years, which amounts to around $40 million on a weekly basis. And so this is one way of building that pressure. Other countries have to join this effort and bring the pressure so the Taliban can feel that, well, we are not invincible, that, of course, we are in trouble. And building that pressure both internally and externally is very much important. So countries like Pakistan, which, as I mentioned, is the most important neighbor that Afghanistan has because we're connected in so many ways: history, culture, religion, and just the political dynamics between the two countries. We don't share that with any other country in the region. It's very much important to understand that it's time to shift policy, to change the strategy that has been pursued for 40 years now, and to think about a better approach that can benefit both people.
As you said, over 40 years, right, a lot of water has flown under the bridge and sort of the structure of the bridge has been damaged and weakened, as we've discussed early as well. We're in a different era now. It's 2025. And as you said, as we discussed, Pakistan is trying to reorient its strategy. The National Resistance Front has operations and is expanding its footprint. Are there tangible steps that you, in your view, both sides can take at this moment to rebuild a more positive relationship, given that history of mistrust, of bad decision making, bad strategies, poor choices, etc.? Given where we are today, what, in your view, can both the NRF and the Pakistani side can do to sort of start afresh and build on something more positive?
Well, we've shown our good faith and goodwill in many ways, even before August 2021, whether it's Mr. Ahmad Massoud, the leader of the National Resistance Front, I myself, and many other senior members of the National Resistance Front. So we've been expressing a different narrative for both countries. As I mentioned, well, as the head of foreign relations for the NRF, I wrote an essay that presents a new narrative, a new vision for both countries, which was published by the University of Karachi and with the help of a German foundation. I believe it's IFES. I forgot the exact name, but I proposed how we can take steps both politically. Back then, of course, the government of Afghanistan was still in place, so we proposed steps to solve our security concerns, our economic concerns, and even religious concerns. The rise of extremism has put our traditional Islam on the path of extinction. The traditional Islam of both countries, which is the same, based on rationality, based on tolerance, a more moderate interpretation of the religion, is on the verge of extinction because of the rise of these extremists and terrorist groups. So both countries back then, I proposed that we have to cooperate with one another so we can save the interpretation of Islam and the school of thought of Islam that has existed in both countries, that has dominated our region for 1,300 years. But even politically, taking small steps for confidence building, for trust building, which is needed, of course, because we have that 70 plus years of history, and then the past 40 years of conflict have also widened that trust deficit. So I believe steps have to be taken to show that we're on the path of change, that we are serious with change. And this is something that we are waiting from the Pakistani side, is, of course, the change of rhetoric. We do acknowledge that, the change of tone and language and everything else has been acknowledged. But it's time to take steps and to show that change can be translated into action. It's something that we haven't seen for years. We are optimistic that we might see it in the future, but again, we have to be cautious with that, and we are looking forward to seeing those changes, that shift in policy from Islamabad through action now. And through that, then, of course, the people of Afghanistan can reciprocate. I believe it's a two-way street, and of course, with such measures being taken by Pakistanis, the people of Afghanistan can take such measures. One action, of course, that we've been taking is that our war is not against only the Taliban of Afghanistan, as I mentioned, but our struggle and war is against all forms of terrorism inside Afghanistan, against from the Taliban terrorist group of Afghanistan up to TTP, to Al Qaeda, and others. One. Two is the National Resistance Front in our basic principles, which was published in 2022. In my statements, in our other official statements, in a book that was recently published by the leader of the National Resistance Front, Mr. Ahmad Massoud, we have clearly expressed our vision that Afghanistan has to be a neutral country in the future. So once we liberate the country, we cannot go back to the policies that we were being pursued after 2001 or pursued after the independence of Pakistan or any other that created hostilities. So we have to take a new path based on our vision that Afghanistan has to be a totally neutral country where no country feels threatened by Afghanistan, that no country feels that there is security concerns within Afghanistan, or Afghanistan is challenging any neighbor or any regional country whatsoever. And so we have to guarantee that Afghanistan soil will be completely neutral, and that Afghanistan is committed to friendly relations with all countries that it borders and all countries in the international community, and that we will pursue a policy that facilitates and strengthens regional integration when it comes to economic cooperation, cultural cooperation, political cooperation. This is something that we've expressed, and we are fully committed to it, and we've been saying this since our formation. However, we're not in that stage to prove this, to take action. So the first steps have to be taken by other countries, especially by Pakistan. And after that, we will be able to reciprocate.
Last question. You mentioned the Biden administration and the $40 million a week that they provide to the Afghan Taliban as assistance, and that being a mechanism, at least to put financial pressure on them, among others. There's a suite of options that has been discussed in other countries as well. There's a new game in town here in Washington where I sit and where I'm talking to you from today. And President Trump obviously has a different approach and has signaled a strategic review of a whole host of foreign policy issues, including, to my understanding, on Afghanistan as well. What is the NRF expecting in terms of a strategic policy review from the incoming or now new Trump administration? And how are you assessing this change of administration in America?
Well, of course, we have our optimism. I do spend time in Washington, D.C., so I have been able to engage with many individuals who are part of the new administration for the past few months, even many, well, before the elections, who are now part of the administration for the past few years. So we believe that the individuals who will be making decisions regarding our region fully understand the problems of Afghanistan, who have deep knowledge about Afghanistan, who are totally hostile towards terrorism, and that they will be making better decisions than the officials that were part of the Biden administration. The problem when it came to the Biden administration is they lacked interest in Afghanistan. They didn't want to focus on this region, on this country, and basically we saw that with the mess that Biden created with his disastrous withdrawal and how he handled it, and then the policy of appeasement that was pursued by the Biden administration up to January 20. But through my engagements and my interactions with the new people in town, we have, of course, high expectations and, of course, optimism. For this reason, our advocacy has increased, and as one objective that we are pursuing and pushing for is to cut off ties to the Taliban terrorist group, which is benefiting all terrorists inside Afghanistan. Of course, the messaging that we receive is also promising, from the president, going down to other officials within this administration. Their whole messaging about the weapons left behind in Afghanistan, which is strengthening terrorism regionally and globally, is creating hopes, and I believe targeting the Taliban terrorist group when it comes to their financial means and their arms and equipment that they have will certainly weaken them and allow the people of Afghanistan to liberate their country and to secure the region, because that is how they came to power and that is how they've survived for the past few years. They lack popular legitimacy. They don't have the support of the people. As every day passes, they are weakening from within. They are competing over wealth and resources. They are becoming highly corrupt. They are basically a criminal organization today, only exploiting everyone, whether it's the people of Afghanistan and other countries, to benefit themselves for their group interests. And so we believe that the new administration in the United States in the coming months will be shifting policy. People like Mike Waltz at the National Security Council, who have a good grasp when it comes to our region and Afghanistan, will be making the right decisions. So we are hopeful and optimistic. We believe 2025 is going to be a better year than 2024 and other years before that, for not only us, but for everyone. And basically, we are hoping, we are, of course, optimistic as well that the current trajectory will change and the terrorists will be defeated. And of course, a new era of amity, as I stated before, will be created between our countries and our people.
Well, Ali, thank you so much for your time, and I hope
Thank you for
that,
having me.
the policy change also happens. I'm hopeful like you as well, because again, as we both agree, and many increasingly in Pakistan agree, that if the Taliban continue to follow an extremist agenda, a non-inclusive agenda, an agenda that provides safe havens to terror groups, then the whole region is destabilized. And I think in Washington, this administration at least understands that reality better than the previous one. So let's hope for the best. And maybe as things evolve, I would love to have you back on this podcast to talk more about how you see things evolving. But before I let you go, I always ask my guests this question: what are 2 or 3 books you would recommend to the audience?
Well, first and foremost, to better understand the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, I would recommend Mr. Ahmad Massoud's book. In English, it's called In the Name of My Father, Struggling for Freedom in Afghanistan. 2, a book about Afghanistan's history. I would recommend The History of Afghanistan by Jonathan Lee, which is basically a critique about the history of the past few centuries and why we are facing the problems and issues of Afghanistan internally and externally. Third, I would say the book that came out, which one of my chapters was also part of it, about the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. I believe it's called the Afghanistan-Pakistan or Pakistan-Afghanistan relations, opportunities and pitfalls, something like that. But one of the editors was Miss Homa Bakai, and it was of course published by the University of Karachi. And there is a lot of valuable content chapters in that book that address all of these problems that we were able to discuss a few of them today.
Thank you so much for those recommendations. I will link to the web links for those books in the description if anyone wants to go check these books out. And again, appreciate your time, your insights, and look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you. Likewise. Take care, sir.